Hello, everybody. This is Miss Patrick Fitzsimmons coming to you from Hangar 1 here at my little place, and we're going to go over an introduction to LSL coding, scripting. It wouldn't be right if I didn't start out with a basic introductory lesson for you, just in case you have never scripted in LSL before and you want to learn how to do it. And if you already know the basics, then this video you can probably just skip and move on to another video that I might have that is more your speed. So welcome to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. And I want to get right into it so you can start learning. And so I'm going to press Control 4 on my keyboard here. Oh, first I got to select here. Select the right window, mitts. Control 4 on my keyboard, bring up the build window, and I can build a box. And then I can go to the content tab and hit new script. You're going to see a little text message down there saying object hello avatar. From the default script, we can double click it to open that up. And here's the default script. And if you notice, the default state is already defined for us with a couple of event handlers here. We got a state entry event handler and a touch start event handler. And we have a function, a say function in each one of those event handlers. And each of the function is LLSay, and so it uses a couple of variables as the parameters. And so we're going to start talking about variables. Variables are things that we can define globally or locally, and if we want to define them globally, we'll define them outside of the default state. It doesn't matter where you define it. You can put a variable down here, although it would be kind of awkward, I think. But you can do it. So let's say string name equals Fitzpatrick Fitzsimmons, and that with a quote and a semicolon. And so I have this this variable. It's a string variable called name, and it has Patrick Fitzsimmons as the data for that variable type. And so in our state entry event, we can just take out this hello avatar. Actually, let's leave the hello avatar. Let's leave the hello. We'll take out the avatar. We'll leave the comma, and then we'll leave a space. And then we'll say plus. We're going to concatenate to add our string name variable. And so if I save the script now, well, I get an error. What did I do wrong? A syntax error on line 16. String name equals Fitzpatrick Fitzsimmons. Wow, I guess it doesn't like having the variables on the bottom. So let's copy that, go back, we'll put it on the top and see if that is still a problem, or did I still make a mistake. Save it there, and it compiles successfully. And it works, and it says hello Fitzpatrick Fitzsimmons, because that's the name that we chose for our name, our string variable here, name. And it doesn't have to be name. We can name the string pretty much anything we want, as long as it's not a built-in LSL constant type thing, like state. State, you see it's blue there, so that's a defined LSL predefined constant that we can't use as a variable name. The same thing with return. Notice anytime you type a variable type that you might want to use, if it turns blue like that, it's going to mean it's something you can't use because it's a built-in constant that LSL uses for something else. But it makes sense to name your variables, you know, what it is. So if you're going to have a string variable that's going to use a username, then it makes sense to call that variable name, or something like that. You could use avatar, I guess, if you want, as a variable, and so we would just have to change the variable name here to say avatar, and we could save that. And now it still says hello, Ms. Patrick Fitzsimmons, because our variable type is string here, concatenated on in our say function. So this variables, we've got several types. We have integers, which is a whole number, so like 10. We have floats, which is a decimal number. Let's say 1 point. Oh, actually, you know what? A good decimal number is 3.14159. That's all I can remember from pi off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm not one of those guys that can go, 20, 30 numbers down the line right off the top of my head. I go 3.159. That's it. 14159. Anyhow, moving on, we've got vectors that we can use as a variable. And vector, generally when we use a vector, it's either going to be a color or it's going to be a location, like a position. Whether that position is region or like a local position, say if an object was on your HUD or attached to your avatar, it would be like a local position. But we're going to make a color here, so we're going to call that color red equals and 1, 0, 0. So that is the vector color for red. Basically the RGB values. So if we have a 1 here, so we have 0 to 1, it's always going to be a float variable. So we could say like, 0.5, it's like half red, if you want to look at it that way. Or you could add 0.5 here, and now it's a half yellow color. It doesn't matter what your variable name is, it matters what the variables actually are inside of your put this back to red here. Oh, that was supposed to be 0. What is inside of your vector? That's what determines the data. The name doesn't matter. You could say color yellow and still have this, and it would still come out as red. So that's how we're going to use a vector, and we'll get more into those later. And we got rotations, which when you're writing them, let's say rotation turn, trun, T-U-R-N, get with it, Mets, equals, and it's very similar to how we write a vector for a rotation, except instead of 3 floats, we have to have 4 to define a rotation. I am actually not going to get into the specifics of rotations in this video. That kind of requires its own video all by itself, as do our last variable type, which is a list. And we can say list of stuff equals, and then a list is always put inside of square brackets. So it's like an array in other languages, but you can have any variable type in a list except for another list. You can have a string, you can have a float, you can have a vector, you can have rotations, integers, all of them except for a list. There is ways to kind of do list to list sort of things, but not directly. So, and again, lists will require its own video, but I just wanted to give you some information on the variable types that we do have to use in LSL, and so list is one of them. So we can put all of the variable types as an integer, and say 1.234, there's a float. We'll put in howdy as a string. We can put in our vector. let's make it 0, 0, 1. That's blue. And then we could even put in a rotation. Oh, we need 4 of them. There we go. And that is basically all the variable types that we can use inside of a list. We just can't put a list inside of a list. So if I save this, it should compile. And it looks like I'm going to get an IM in possibly a minute. That's one of the caveats of doing scripting video tutorials is when people come online, I think she's going to IM me. It's a friend I haven't seen in a long time. I got a syntax error here. What did I do wrong? Maybe you can figure it out. Integer. I said integer equals 10, and I didn't give it a name. So integer, we're going to call that 10. We'll call it 10. And then same thing with a float. I didn't name the float, so we'll name it pi. So float pi equals 3.14159. And now we'll save it, and it should compile. Nope, what did I do wrong again? Color, oh, that's supposed to be an underscore. There we go. It was trying to see a mathematical operation. I didn't have the underscore, I had the minus sign. And so now we've got it compiled, and we've got all of our variables here declared and defined. And these are global, so we can use these variables anywhere we want in our script. Let's see if I can sort of clean these up. I like to line things up. That's one thing you'll probably learn in scripting is you're gonna want to line things up a certain way. And let's see there. We'll just whoop. It just makes it easier to read sometimes, especially if you're making notes. You know, like this, we'll put in, you know, my name. We'll just put in a little comment note here. And if you have a bunch of these, you might want to line them up. Just makes your code look pretty and a lot easier to read, especially if you have to go back, you know, and search through thousands of lines or hundreds of lines of code. You want to be able to easily read, you know, what's going on. That's just my preference. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can take out all your little white spaces and you can code any way you want. But so that's kind of our variables. Now, like I said, all these variables I've made, I've declared the name and I've defined the variable here. You know, I basically put the data in globally, but I can also, let's make a string and we'll call it, not sting, string, and we'll call it, well, we could call it sting, but we won't. We're just going to call it last name. And then we'll just put a semicolon and we'll just not, so we've declared it, but we haven't defined it. There's a difference. So we'll save that. And so since there's nothing defined here yet, if I put in last name instead of our avatar here and save it, what's going to happen? It's going to say hello with a comma because last name doesn't have any information defined. It's only been declared as a global variable. And so if I put the information in, Fitzsimmons, and save it, now it should say hello Fitzsimmons. There we go. Oh, Fitzsimmons. There we go. Put the S in there. We'll save it. And hello Fitzsimmons. So that's the last name. And so let's take out this. And we'll just put that as first name. We'll say, just rename it first name. And I'm going to just concatenate on, put a space in, and then say first name. So now it's going to say last name and then a space and then first name. So kind of backwards. Last name first. And computer's kind of going slow. Compiling. Hello, Fitzsimmons, Fitzpatrick. That's exactly what we expect. And so that's kind of the idea of what our variables are, what we can do with them, and that's globally. But let's say I wanted a local variable just to be defined in, let's say, our state entry. I'm going to make an integer I, and we're going to put a for loop here. And so this is a little bit more of an advanced. We'll get into for loops in some future videos, but I'm just going to show you basically right here. We can say for I equals 0, put a semicolon. I is less than or equal to 10, put a semicolon, and then I plus plus to increment I up to 10. So we put in our curly brackets for our for loop, and let's take this say message right out. And so it's going to, let's do an owner say message here. And we'll say the number of I equals, well, we've got to put that in quotes. We need a string here, so that's it. Always put in quotes. The number of I equals, and then we will typecast by putting string in parentheses, and then our integer I, so we've typecast I to a string. And so what's this going to do? It's going to run our for loop from 0 to 10, so that should give us 11 iterations, because we said from 0 and then less than or equal to 10. So it's going to say the number of I is going to start at 0 and it's going to end at 10. And so if we save that, if I don't have any errors, no, I do, because I forgot to put my little addition plus sign here to concatenate the string variable that the string I've typecast, I. And there we go. And so it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And that's 11 iterations right there, because we decided to start at 0. That's one thing you'll learn with lists, is when you're working with lists, and again, this will be, I'll repeat this in the future video when we get to the video of lists, but lists, you always start at 0. That's the first item in a list, similar to an array in other programming languages like maybe C++ or Python, or uh, even PHP or Perl. So you might be used to that if you're already used to coding, but if you're not used to coding, then this is a good introductory lesson to learn a little bit about a for loop. And so we'll get into more of that in future videos. I just wanted to show you the difference between a global variable here and then a local variable that we're using down in the state entry. See, if I had just taken this for loop out, let's just take the for loop out, and then I will put in owner say message. How could I put a space there? But the variable I is, and then put a quote, space, plus string. We're going to typecast that integer. And so it's going to say the variable of I is going to give us the value, as a string. We've typecast here. And it's going a little slow. There we go. The variable I is 0 because we've only declared the variable. We haven't even defined it. So automatically it's a 0. Now if we said I equals 334, then it will tell us I is 334. So now we've defined the variable. So this is just declaring it without any information. And again, this is a local variable, integer I. It's not a global variable like these are up here. So if I put if I put this owner say message in our touch start event, for instance, it's going to say name not defined within scope. It's going to give us an error because I is only a local variable to the state entry event handler, right? It doesn't get recognized in our touch start event because we don't have an integer I already defined. Now if I define integer I down here, it's going to compile correctly. And the variable is 0. That's still saying that from the state entry, but if I close the build window out and then touch the box, it'll say the variable I is 0. And so in our state entry, again, I'm going to define, define the variable I equals, let's say, 23 in our state entry. And then in our touch start event, I equals 42. And we'll save that. That'll compile. And so our state entry, yep, the variable I is 23. And when we touch it, the variable I is 42. And so these are two different I's. These are two different variables, and they're only available locally inside each of these event handlers. And so we could have any other event handler. Let's say we had a collision, just a regular old collision event handler. And let's see, make sure I did that correctly. Yeah, so we got a collision event handler, and I could make integer. Why do I keep spelling it wrong? Integer I down here equal to, I don't know, 88. And we'll just copy this owner say message here and paste it down there. Save that. And so our state entry again gets fired off right at the beginning every time. And so touch the box, yeah, still 42. And now if I hit the box, it's 88. And see, it keeps going because the collision event gets triggered as many times as I hit the box. That's just something particular to the collision event itself. Now if I say collision start, it's only going to do it one time. And let's just change the variable here to 99. We'll save that. And now it's a collision start event, which is different from a regular collision event. If I hit it, it's only going to say it once. It's not going to say it more than, well, if I hit it again, it will. But yeah, hit it once, hit it once. But if I keep standing on it and I don't move, it's not going to keep triggering that collision event. It only triggers it once. That's just inherent to the collision and collision start event handlers. They're different. And we also have a collision end event that we could put. And we could just copy paste this. And we'll say I equals 79 and Save that. And so on our collision start, when we hit it, it's going to say 99, and our collision end will happen, and it will say 79. There's 99, 79, 99, 79, 99, 79. So start and end. That's just inherent differences between the event handlers. And there's a lot of different event handlers we will be learning about. But these are the basics. You got your variables, you've got your state, you've got your event handlers, we've got our functions, showed you a for loop, and showed you the difference between a global and a local variable. And we showed you a different couple of event handlers here that are similar to each other but different. The collision start, the collision end, of course, just the general collision event handle that we had earlier. And that should give you a basic idea of how we're going to be writing scripts in LSL and other languages. And so I guess that is going to conclude the lesson for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment below. And if you like this video, please feel free to give me a thumbs up. And if you didn't like this video, please tell me why and what I can do to improve it. I guess that's going to be about it for me for now. I guess so. We'll say catch you later. Bye.